What if the one thing we fear most in life is also the thing we understand the least?
Every one of us will lose someone we love. Every one of us will eventually face our own mortality. Yet most Americans avoid talking about death until they're standing in the middle of grief.
We prepare for retirement, we prepare for college, we prepare for vacations, but almost no one prepares for loss.
And that's why grief can feel so lonely. We don't have the language. We don't know what to say to someone who's hurting. We don't know how to process even our own emotions.
Today's guest believes there's another way, a healthier, more compassionate way to think about death that can actually change how we live.
So stay with us. This may be one of the most meaningful conversations we've ever had on Late Boomers.
Welcome to the Late Boomers podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories of people creating new chapters in life with style, purpose, and impact. I'm Cathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins.
As baby boomers, many of us are beginning to experience more loss than ever before. Parents, siblings, lifelong friends, spouses, and sometimes heartbreakingly, even children.
Death is the one experience every family will face. Yet it's the conversation we rarely have until we're forced into it. We often don't know what to say to someone who's grieving, and we certainly don't know we are taught how to navigate our own grief.
Yeah, but what if changing the way we think about death could actually change the way we live?
Our guest today has spent more than 20 years exploring that very question.
After the devastating loss of his son, Steven Ferrara began writing in journals as a way to survive unimaginable grief. Those deeply personal reflections eventually became a powerful book that offers a fresh perspective on death, healing, gratitude, and living with purpose.
Yeah, few people have explored these questions as deeply or as personally as Steven. So, Steven, welcome to Late Boomers.
Thank you, Cathy and Merry. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, Steven, your book grew out of more than 20 years of journals after losing your son. So what made you realize those private writings could become something that would help other people?
Well, it's a good question. I never really did the journals other than for my own self. It was necessary therapy, let's call it, for me to just express such intense, almost unimaginable emotion. My son was 23. Maybe like a lot of sons. I mean, he was just my best buddy. I have 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. He was our oldest. So we were really close. We still are. We have a bond, but we were in business together. We played golf together. We could end each other's sentences. We were literally, 2 peas in the same pot, or 2 pot, or however that saying goes. But we were, and still are, continuing our relationship, which we'll talk about. But when my son died, previous to his death, I journaled occasionally and realized, though, that I needed to journal on a daily basis, sometimes a couple of times a day, starting the morning after he died. And it just was a place for me to, just put my raw emotion. And I did that every day for literally almost 20 years. I sold my business almost 6 years ago. And, it was the first time I ever looked back at any journals. By then I had a whole huge bookshelf of journals and decided to start from journal 1 and start reading. And it took me 2 years to get through them. I must have 1 million words in these journals. And I was taking excerpts along the way and realizing that I was truly learning some major life-changing lessons as I was going through the months and the years.
Wow.
Just through journaling with stream of consciousness, never really thinking, just journaling. I started to see real turning points in this document of my life, basically, over those last almost 20 years. And I was living my life in a very healthy way by that point, but I didn't really know that there were very specific kind of points where I had whatever it may have been, a revelation or some kind of a new understanding that helped me continue to move forward in a very healthy way. And
God.
so after I took all these excerpts, I had, probably, I don't know, a few hundred pages of excerpts, and was recommended to an editor who has done a lot of editing for spiritually oriented books, which is really the direction that my book comes from. And she said, if we work together, I could turn this into something, turn it into a
Hmm.
manuscript, and truly help a lot of people. And we did that. And about a year later, got a manuscript, went to a publisher, and now Grief to Gratitude has just come out a couple of months ago,
Yeah.
and seems to be really making a difference,
I,
which I'm
I can only imagine just if, when you started writing the book or before when you started reading the journals, the emotional trauma you had to go through all over again. Because losing a child is every parent's worst nightmare. So you answered this in one way, but looking back now, besides journaling, what else helped you survive?
yeah. Well, in the early days, um, there was really nothing other than needing to give an outlet to this unimaginable amount of intense energy within me. And I was a runner at the time. We lived out in the country area. And I would take these long runs, 5, 6 mile runs, and literally scream at the top of my lungs, usually really pissed off at the universe or really mad at God or
Mhm.
just angry in general. I don't suggest it to everyone. I happen to live in an area where I could scream at the top of my lungs and I wouldn't get the cops called on me. And I did it almost every day. Or I screamed and
Wow.
uncontrollably into a pillow if necessary. I also, being a baby boomer and coming up in the 60s, Transcendental meditation came around, and I
Mhm.
decided to take that kind of a course back when I was 16. So that's meditation's always been an extremely important part of my life. And that became even more important for me to find a way to kind of cool my jets, so to speak, and just find some degree of peace inside, which was not easy, especially first 6, 8, 12 months because of the looping, just anger, grief, confusion, just questioning everything I'd ever known and learned. As you mentioned, I taught spiritual principles for 20 years of my life for an institution, an
Oh.
educational institution. And, I thought I had a pretty strong foundation of understanding. But when something like this happens, all of that goes out the window.
Yeah.
And you question everything. You question everything you've ever learned. You question life. And
Yeah.
it was really through some of these things I was doing, the journaling, the meditating. I would take long walks by the beach. We lived down in Florida, and just like let my mind go and just watch all of this intensity coming up, just trying to give it an outlet in some way, shape, or form. I would talk to a few very close people to me that were not going to give me sympathy, but were going to give me an open ear just to be able to talk to. They gave me more understanding than sympathy, which was exactly what I needed. I didn't need sympathy. And
Mhm, mhm.
you
Oh,
mentioned
for
in the
sure.
intro, our society has no idea, unfortunately, in many ways, to deal with death.
Mhm.
And giving each other sympathy is seemingly the the accepted way, and yet it does not necessarily help in the
I
long.
agree. I agree with that
Really,
because I've
really.
lost my spouse, so has Mary. And but you write about choosing between anger and blame or
Mhm.
the inner path of healing. So how'd you find the strength to make that choice? You seem like you were doing really positive things, both the running and the meditation.
Yeah.
But then how do you make that jump?
Yeah. How do you do it? And how do you not blame yourself too, even though there's no way you could have blamed yourself? But we all
Yeah.
seem to do that.
Well, there's a number of things, and I saw these very clearly as I looked back through my journals. Firstly, uh, at some point, even though I may not ever agree that this should have occurred, it makes no sense, but I had to accept that that's the way life was planned to be. And the only reason I know that is because it happened. And I
Yeah.
don't think that the universe makes mistakes. It would make no sense that this universe, or that God, if there is one, makes mistakes. This universe is just too uh, immense and incomprehensible and magnificent for it to be making mistakes. So I had to accept that my son's life, even though I'll never understand why, was to only live 23 years for whatever the reason. That was his destiny because it happened. And as I accepted that, I began to realize that no matter what I did, and there was a lot of things when I thought back before I realized this acceptance that I would beat myself up about. I could have done, I could have this, I should have that, I would have that. And you just beat yourself up. And much of my family, my
Yeah.
daughters, my son's fiance, we all were in that level of just beating ourselves up over what we could have and should have and would have done, until this idea of understanding the importance of accepting that life has been unfolding, for billions of years. If there, was a big bang, it's 14 billion years ago, and life has been unfolding since then. And we live on this tiny little planet in a grand galaxy that has billions of suns, trillions of planets, and supposedly 2 trillion galaxies. So, it's been unfolding all of these eons of time. And now all of a sudden, just because I'm here for some very, very tiny short period of time, why should life ask me my opinion and or even ask me my agreement? Life has never come to me and said, "Hey, do you think that this is the right thing to do?" Life just does what it does.
Yeah.
And what we can do, and people say, well, then is it just destiny? No, not at all, because what we have as a superpower, which I discovered, is the power to choose how we're going to respond to how life is unfolding. That's what gives us freedom. That's what gives us the ability to live our life and experience our life in the way we want to experience it.
Yeah.
And so, even
Mhm.
is something as huge and almost unimaginable, like my son and then later my wife passing away, I had to realize that I still have the ability to choose how I want to respond to this. And
Yeah.
I can choose
Mhm.
either as a victim and go in the corner and cry out my eyes for the rest of my life, so to speak, or I can choose to look at this in another way. And you mentioned, in the intro about looking at it a little bit more curiously, trying to
Mhm.
understand this thing, death. Don't look at it with fear. Let me understand this in a little bit of a bigger, better way. And in trying to understand uh, death, it enabled me to live my life in a better
Mhm.
way. And I was able to truly begin to, uh, see this experience as something that I can learn so much from. One of the first things that made a big difference in my life that I saw in my journaling is it was probably less than a year in, and one day I'm just journaling away, and it came to me that I don't have to look at this just from my side of this. My side is very sad, and that's why society doesn't really understand death that well, because we only look at it from our side, which is a sad side because we're the ones left behind and that person moved on. But it
Yeah.
dawned on me,
Mhm.
I can look at this from my son's side of this experience. I can look at this as his ongoing journey, and as his dad who loves him unconditionally, I will continue to love and support him in this ongoing journey. And when I began to expand my context of the way I was looking at this, it opened up like new ways of me understanding this experience. I began to think in terms of I can think about what can be in our relationship as opposed to what could have been. Like it always was about could have been grandfather, I could have been in business, could have, should have, it would, and you just exhaust yourself with all of the could haves and would haves. But then when I started
Mhm.
looking at it from Christopher's side of the experience, I realized this can be about what can be in our ongoing and growing spiritual relationship. It wasn't going to be a human relationship anymore. I couldn't
Yeah.
sit across from him and had a cup of coffee and hug him, but could I still have a deep level love-based relationship with him? And the answer was absolutely yes. It's just maybe a different way of communicating. And part of it for me was journaling. Another part of it was quieting my mind where I felt his presence. Another part of it was in talking to other people about him, whether it was families or friends, and I could feel his presence. I was so fortunate to have dreams about him. I could walk in nature and just feel his presence. And so it was a
You
different
know,
way of
yeah,
having
Stephen,
relate.
I mean, you're talking about exactly what's on my mind right now because so many people, including, I don't know about you, Kathy, but me, it took me forever to let go. And so many people worry that letting somebody go, that person that they loved, and move forward is something that they should feel guilty about. And what would you say to somebody who feels guilty about moving forward? Because you had a life with that person, and suddenly your life with them is over. What do you do? Where do you go? And how do you go on and not feel guilty?
Yeah. And it's a very common thing, Mary. But it is, and I'll say it to you, I may not say it to somebody that's in the middle of grief at the moment, but it is absolutely, completely, 100% the wrong way of looking at it. And the reason I say that is that somehow, some way, probably from our religious background, guilt has been taught to us as being a good thing. You know,
Mhm.
you should be
Mhm.
punished for your sins. You should feel guilty for your sins. You know, I grew up in the Catholic religion. I mean, I know the Jewish religion is big on guilt. A lot of religions are big on using guilt as a manipulative thing. And somehow it's twisted in our mind like guilt is a good thing to feel. Oh, if I feel guilty, then it means, it's almost like saying, unless my spouse is jealous of me, then she doesn't love me or he doesn't love me. And how completely opposite of the truth is that? Because
Yeah.
jealousy is not based in love. Jealousy is based in insecurity. Jealousy is based in anger. Jealousy is not a
Mhm.
good thing in a relationship.
And
But
lack
Mhm.
of trust.
exactly.
Yeah.
And guilt is no different. What I had to understand is that love is a bond for you and your spouses, like with my spouse and my son. Love is a bond that's at a much deeper level. It's certainly not just limited to the human form of body and mind and emotion. Love is something that we feel at a very deep level. And when you truly love someone, you know it. I mean, you just feel that love within yourself. And I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt, if there's anyone that I can say I loved unconditionally and continued to, it was my son. We just accepted each other unconditionally. And that
But
bond,
you never really let go. You're still with him, but I don't know if you've moved on or how you've moved on. But still, what you were talking about with being with your son now and giving him the opportunity to live the journey that he's on, whatever it is right now. So that's kind of wouldn't that alleviate guilt?
Uh, I guess I don't look at my relationship with my son as having not let go. I've completely let go. I support him 100% on wherever his journey is taking him. What I do know though is that the relationship that I have with my son, that I had with him while he was here for 23 years, I still continue to have. It didn't end. Love doesn't end. When you think about
Mhm.
it, love is not something you get from someone. Love is not about getting. Love is about giving. And that's all it's about. But it's another one of those kind of screwy things in our society like, oh, I got to get
Mhm.
love from him. I've got to get love from her. My children have to love me. Baloney. You have to love them. And in your sharing of your love, that's how you feel it. I mean, when you think about it, it's pretty simple. You can't feel somebody else's feeling. You only feel your own. So when
Mhm.
you share your love with someone, that's how you feel love. So why would it be
Mhm.
any different if I continue to share my love with my son, continue to share my love with my wife? Why would it be any different other than, which is a big deal, I can't hug him anymore. I can't.
Mhm. It is a big deal.
I mean, that's a big deal. But
Yeah, it is.
what I come to the realization of is sadness is something that will always be around. And I'll say this again to you, and I'm maybe going beyond what I'd say to grieving people, depending on where they're at. But sadness is overrated. Sadness is a feeling, and
Mhm.
if you just and you don't
Well,
get me.
along those lines, you've introduced what you call a new paradigm on death. So what is it and why does it have the power to change people's lives?
The new paradigm is that we get confused in life, that we think that life and death are like the polar opposites. What are the polar opposites is birth and death. Life is
Oh.
something that continues on. It's eternal. If there's any part of us that goes beyond this human experience. And I guess I've always been designed to know to some level that I am a spiritual being having this human experience. I truly believe that there's got to be so much more than just this human experience. It would make no sense that we live 80 or 100 years and then we're buried and that's it. I mean, it just makes no sense. There's just not enough to the human experience to make it the only thing that there can
Mhm.
be. I see it as part of an ongoing journey. And so if we look at life as being eternal, and birth and death are, let's say, parenthesis in eternal time, it's a parenthesis where we get to enjoy a human experience, which when you think about what the human experience is, it's not a lot. It's five senses and it's thoughts and emotions. It's not anything else. That's the experience.
That's it.
This thoughts and
But
emotions.
but what a gift.
What a wonderful gift.
Right,
80
right.
100 years. It's almost like a little vacation. Like, if there is a source or God, it's like, you know what? And I just read this the other day. It was amazing to me. Scientists tell us that it's the odds of us being born a human are 1 in 4 trillion. Now, I don't know where they come up with it, but it's a scientific fact, they say, based on all of the variables, that for us to live a human life, the odds are 1 in 4 trillion that us, exactly as we are, will be here. And so we've got to be
Mhm.
so grateful, like you just said, Mary. What a
Mhm.
gift that we get to live on this beautiful
Mhm.
planet. I mean, I won't want to live on Mars. I much prefer to live on this beautiful Earth with its trees and its animals and its beauty. And you know, it's it's something where we get this almost little vacation for 80 or 100 years.
Yeah.
It is a parenthesis in time, this human
Yeah.
experience, and we continue on. So the new paradigm, to your point, Kathy, is that truly to understand that life is eternal. Now, science tells us that by saying that energy can never be created nor destroyed, it just is. And if we want to go from the spiritual or religious side, they just say God has always been here, is eternal. So both of our authorities, so to speak,
Mhm.
this both talk about either energy or God, or being eternal, life being eternal. And
Mhm.
you know, whether I choose to believe or no, I know for me that life has to continue on. I've
So
read
if more of us embrace that perspective, how might it change the way we live every day?
exactly. Really good point, because that's what it's all about. If we can understand death and realize that it's just a transition in our ongoing journey, then we can live life with a whole lot less fear, because fear of death is still the most feared thing in this human race. We all fear dying. That's why we make such a big deal out of it. And I'm not saying that I want to die or anybody else around me should die. We should all live to our fullest life until our time has come. But if we can accept that, and I think about this often, just think about this. I think that the number of people that die on a daily basis, like 155 million. It's some crazy number. You can Google it. But it's like, hundreds of millions of people every year die. And if the human race has been here for 100 or 200,000 years, imagine the hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people that have died. It's the one guarantee that we all know as a human
Mhm.
being we have. If we were born,
Yeah.
we're going to die. And yet, we still have such a tough time looking at it. And my
Mm-hmm.
firm belief from my own experience is because we look at it from our side and we are so self-centric about how I feel and how it relates to me. And we're always looking at it from me and mine and how I feel. Meanwhile, if we can just broaden that context a little bit and look at it from their side, many times when people die a more natural death at 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, it's kind of a relief that that person got to take their body off and move on. Why don't we celebrate
Mm-hmm.
that?
Mm-hmm.
Or unfortunately, the way a lot of
Right.
people die these days is in a hospital with all kinds of machinery on them.
Yeah.
Uh, my wife, just a quick story on her. Her death was almost more or as much as my son's. She was a healthy athlete. She played tennis, competitive tennis. She was 60 years old. She started to feel some pain in the side of her body, and we lived in Florida, and they said, "Oh, it's just a pulled muscle. Just take it easy. You'll be fine." And over the course of months, she kept playing, and it just got worse, and she started to not be able to breathe that well. Anyway, we came up to New Jersey for the summer months, right around Mother's Day, just after that, and decided, you know what, let's check out a doctor up here and see what they say. They send her for a CAT scan, and she had stage 4 lung cancer
Oh,
by time this occurred.
oh,
Uh, they From the time she was diagnosed to the time she died was 7 weeks because they threw
Yeah.
everything into her: chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation. They literally tore her body apart. But it was in their efforts to save her. They felt she was healthy. We're going to do everything we can to help. But
Mm.
she
God.
died from
Yeah.
from treatments 7 weeks later. Now, that all
mm,
being said, and getting back to the point I was getting at, my wife, after 7 weeks, went from being an athlete to totally torn apart. She couldn't get out of bed. All of her muscle, everything was taken by these treatments. And
Uh,
as much as I knew by then, it was 10 years after my son died, so I understood the process of grieving and death. And while it turned my world upside down, I mean, she was my partner forever. We met when we were 20, married at 21. We were married almost 40.
oh,
Um,
mm-hmm.
but I knew that my wife would never have ever wanted to live that way. And in some
Right.
way, when I was able to just look at it from her side and take my very sad feelings out of the equation, I was almost celebrating for her. Thank
Yeah.
God that it was only
Yeah.
6 weeks and this was not prolonged for a year or two. In my opinion,
Yeah.
that's a selfish way. Well, let them keep living, keep living. No, if they're
No.
having no quality of life, let that poor person leave their body and move on in their journey. It's got to be a better place where they can take
Right.
this old
Right.
body
Well,
off of an old coat.
Stephen, to
On.
pivot back to what we were talking a little bit about grief, many listeners that we have are, I'm sure, are carrying grief that has lasted for years. What are the first signs that someone is beginning to move from grief toward gratitude, as the
Yeah.
title says of the book?
Yes, and again, a very good question. And you know what I found for me, and I think it's true of most people, is you get to a point where you don't want sympathy any longer. We don't need, I hate to call it pity parties, but the
Mm-hmm.
grief is great, and
Yeah.
you need it. You need people just doting on you, taking care of you, doing whatever they do. But there does come a point where you've got to decide that I got to move past this. I don't want sympathy any longer. And you, I found for me, I even started to surround myself with different groups of people. Uh, I would find that, if I saw somebody for the first time after my son died, it might have been a year later. And I realized, all right, I got to go through this. They're going to give me their condolences. They're going to lay a heavy, amount of sympathy,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want it. I would listen be very respectful, and I'm very respectful that that's a person doing the very best they know how in the way that
Right.
we've been treated by society. So I don't
Mhm.
put that down, but I just knew it wasn't what I needed anymore.
Yeah.
And I almost physically have to shake it off. I mean, after being in a conversation for a couple of minutes, if I was able to get out of it, and go to the men's room and just shake it off, literally, I didn't want sympathy anymore. I wanted to understand a better way to deal with this than sympathy. One of the
Right.
things I realized, and this I think is critical as well, when I experienced my son's death at 23, it was of such an incomprehensible traumatic level that I said pretty early on that I will not let an experience of that magnitude to happen in my life and let the effect of it being me only feeling sorry for myself. That would
Yeah.
be a disrespect to my son and my relationship with him. I have to find a way to use this unbelievable experience for some good in my life. It can't
Oh,
be just for me to feel sorry for myself.
such a good
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah. So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions Americans have about grieving?
I think generally, whether it's Americans, I've talked to people, in all various countries. Just the other day, Australian people that contacted me to tell me what a difference my book made in their lives. And I
Good.
think, I think the first thing that we have to realize is that life is not here to torture us. Life is here to teach us. And that's something I've always tried to live my life by. For some odd reason, we as a general society like to complain. We like to sometimes be the victim. We talked earlier about the news. I'll never watch it because it's all victim based. And somehow we get some weird comfort out of that. And that is just not
Mhm.
helpful. We need to realize that we're here, and this is another very strong belief of mine, that we're here in this human experience on this beautiful planet Earth, and it's like a classroom. We've been given however many years of our life to truly be a student on this planet Earth and our experiences, to have an opened student mind about what can I learn from all of the experiences that I'm having in my life? What can I be learning from them all? And if we keep that opened student mind and we're curious about things, as opposed to, well, no, I know that's the way it works, or I know, that's closed minded. Opened, curious mind, then we do begin to realize that life is here to teach us and not to torture.
Mhm.
So that
Well,
that's
friends often don't know what to say after someone dies.
Mhm.
What comforts people the most, in your opinion, and what should we avoid saying?
Again, good questions. The way we're trained is to give our condolences, my thoughts and prayers. Some of that is,
Yeah,
just knee jerk reactionary stuff like saying, "Hey, how you doing?" Uh, and again, I don't
right.
put people down for it. We're just having a very open conversation. I'm being direct. Never ever would disrespect people for acting that way because it's the only way we're truly trained to some extent. But
Mhm.
I'll give you an example, and I talk about this in the book. One of the greatest responses, let's say, of love that I ever felt. After my son died, it was about 3 months later, and Christopher had worked at this little kind of Caribbean hotel down in South Florida where we live, and they a young couple had bought it, and they loved Christopher. We met them once. But he worked there for about 6 months. They loved him. He loved them. He was everything from the towel boy to the butler to the bartender. He did it all. And it was just a wonderful, loving relationship that they had with each other. So my wife and I were taking a walk, and we hadn't stopped in to see these people. Didn't know if they knew. We went in, and the couple was there, a beautiful young couple, maybe in their 30s. And we told them that Christopher had passed away in an accident. And they literally said nothing. They looked at us with these just very soft, loving eyes. There was nothing to be said because I knew they loved him. We all loved him. All of our eyes teared up. I felt the presence of Christopher within the love of the four of us, my wife and I, and this couple, and nothing was said. And I'm not saying that that's the only way to handle it in a good way or a healthy way, but it is one way where all you have to do is be there for someone, give them a hug, give them a reassuring, loving, just
It's
look.
so interesting that they themselves were on the same page,
Yeah.
that they both responded the same way. That's
Yeah.
kind of unusual when you have more than one person reacting. They're gonna
It's true.
react differently, but that sounds like they were exactly in tune with you.
And literally we just stood there. Uh, I felt strongly the presence of my son. I think we all did. We all shed a tear and we just hugged each other and we left. And that was one of the most warm and loving reactions I ever got. Others were people just genuinely hugged you. They weren't looking to dump their. I mean, so many people had relationships with my son. They had their own grief they were going through.
Mhm. Of course.
They, when they hugged me, some of them I knew were just there in support. They weren't looking to leave their grief on my shoulders, so to speak. They were there
Yeah.
to truly be there for me. And some just hugged me.
Yeah. Yeah,
Some
some people I remember when my husband passed away, a few people started to cry hysterically, and suddenly I was the one that had to give the care versus them
Isn't that
just
interesting?
it was very hard because
I
it
agree. I
yeah,
felt the same way. There were so many times that exactly what you're saying, I would feel like I was the one helping them.
right,
Yeah.
And it's
right.
like,
Yeah, all of us that happened too.
Yeah,
yeah,
and
For
we're the ones
sure.
that need the hug, but that's
Well,
true, but
they're missing their friend too.
sure.
yeah, well,
Everybody
sure.
feels at a different level, we were married to the person or it was our son, but everybody has lost somebody at that moment. And a lot of times when somebody's like my husband passed at home, Mary's passed at home, when you have to call people to
Yeah.
tell them that happened,
Mhm.
then you're the one like it's so nice if somebody makes the calls for you. I would say that's a number one thing to do.
I agree completely. And
Yeah.
people truly wanting to help. I mean, I can tell you after my son died, and again, these are stories that I tell in a book. I don't even know how it happened, but my son, we just had a 4 hour day funeral, 4 hours in one day, and that was it, funeral. There had to have been 1,000 or 1,200 people that showed up. In fact, they closed down the streets around the funeral home. Anyway, we invited them all back to our house. We happen to have a big house. Fortunately, they didn't all show up, but probably 200 people did. I have no idea how everything got done, but
Yeah.
my wife and I did nothing, and there was enough food, there was enough drinks. The place got cleaned up. Everyone was watching out for each other and watching out for us in particular. That's that level of support that's
Right.
truly, you know,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
It
there
is.
for you.
It
What can I
is.
do? Make the phone calls. Can I get food? Can I get, and they're truly there to just love and support you and not just, feel sorry with you. And
Yeah, that's a
That's
godsend.
wonderful. But
So
also
so
getting back to my question, what should people avoid saying? Is there something specific you have in the book that people
you know,
should not say?
yeah, I don't really, I can't advise someone on what not to say or to say. It's
Okay.
just got to come from feeling and love to the
yeah.
highest level that someone can come from. That's all I can say is that people need to be genuine. People need to realize that they're here to give you love and support, even though I understand they're going through their own grief, but you're the one that had the spouse or the child. They had a relationship. So, maybe you can share in the love that you had for that person, but you don't
Mhm.
want, you don't want them to dump their, feeling sorry for themselves on you.
Well, and one of the things that I think both Mary and I found was kind of horrible is that almost everybody says, "Let me know what I can do for you."
Right,
There
right.
is no way any of us are gonna call and tell someone what they can do for us. I mean, it just doesn't happen. The only people that instead of saying that, just do something, anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Go over and hold their hand or have a cup of tea with them or just bring a meal, but don't say, "What can I do?" Because they will never tell you what you can do.
exactly. And this is, the new paradigm is to be genuine, not to just do the knee-jerk reactionary responses because it's all baloney and we know it. Uh, those of us going through it know it. We're not going to say anything about it. And I think even people that say those things, they may know, but they don't know what else to say, and it's okay. But I agree completely. If you want to do something to truly support someone, just do it. Don't ask, what can I do? Because you're the last person in a mindset to be able to tell them what to do to
Yeah.
help you. They should know what to do to help you.
Yeah.
Come on,
I mean, we
like
don't know.
I had people coming over, when my wife died, especially, they just show up to do my, because I didn't even know how to use my washing machine. I was,
Oh.
my wife and I were the traditional, husband and wife. I always said I made a living and she made the life, and she just ran the family. She did everything. I didn't even know what a washing machine or a dryer was, but people would show up and help me with my laundry. People would show up and take my dry
Yeah,
cleaning. People would show
that's
up and clean the
great.
house, bring food. I mean, that's
That's it.
truly
That's love.
wanting to be
So
supportive.
so Stephen, have readers, you mentioned earlier that some readers have shared stories with you about how your book helped them
Yeah.
heal or see death differently. Can you share one story?
I've heard from many people, but I guess the one thing that stands out, and we've talked about it to some extent, is people have never really thought about looking at it from the deceased's side of the journey. And when you truly do that, and I'll give you an example, and I think I may have mentioned this in the book, but I was meeting with a good friend of mine, known him for over 30, almost 40 years. His wife had passed away maybe 6 months before. And he was telling me that, I'm really just feeling so bad. I can't even understand why, I'm walking down the street and people are happy and talking. And he says, don't they understand? Like, he was just so centered on how he felt and couldn't even understand why other people might be happy during this time. And I said to him, I said, Ron, let me just ask you a question. Have you ever been able to step back and look at this from Karen's side, who that was his wife? And he stopped for a second, never having thought about it, almost looked like a deer in the headlights. And he said, Steve, I've never thought about it that way. And we began to talk about, I mean, his wife died of cancer, and how, of course, our side of it is sad, but she was able, like we've talked about, get out of her body and move on in her journey. Wherever that takes you, it's got to be better than living in that body that was sick. And we had a really good conversation about it, and it literally shifted his way of looking at it. And that's probably the main thing that I've heard from people. Although, at the end of the book, I've got a whole 8-step summary of the things that I've put together as the main insights that I learned that helped me move forward. And, but that's probably the primary one. I think another important thing is, realizing that, the subtitle to my book is The Inner Pathway to Healing and Peace. And the inner pathway is, again, such an important thing for people to understand. Most of us all relate to the outside, from the outside in. It's
Yeah.
all stimuli we're getting. We talked about the news, social media, people, everything else coming in, everything, devices. And we're always in a responding mode. And in fact, many people have gotten to a point where, their mind just doesn't stop. It's just got that constant chatter
Right.
going. And
Mhm.
what I realize is that there's no answers there. And in fact, there's no answers even in thought. Thought, is an important thing, but it doesn't necessarily have the answers to the biggest challenges of life. What I realized is that when I went within, and the only way I know how to do that is either through some form of meditation. It doesn't have to be TM, it could be breathing, it could be guided meditation, but some way to quiet the thinking part of my mind. And by doing that, by realizing that all of this thinking and emotion and everything else going through my mind is not who I truly am. I don't have to identify with all those thoughts that keep going through. I don't have to identify with all those emotions. I may feel them, but it's not who I am. They're just passing through. And as I was able to become more of an observer of all of those thoughts and emotions and not get engaged with them all, I started to feel a more deeper part of myself, what I call the inner pathway, a more peaceful place. It opened up a space for me to begin to look at these experiences in a different way. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
so those are a couple of things that I just think are really important to know, that this life is not lived from the outside in, even though that's the way it's lived in many cases, and that's a very stressed out, anxious life.
hmm
You can live from
Well,
the inside out. That
many of our, yeah, I'm sorry. Many of our listeners are in their 60s and 70s,
Mhm.
maybe beyond. I hope we have. I know of some listeners in their 80s personally. They're facing more loss than ever before. So, what message would you most like for our late boomers audience to take away from today's conversation?
Yeah, and we are. I mean, I'm 71. We're all at an age where, people are going to die. That's what happens. And
Mhm.
No, not us.
Oh, yeah, we're the only ones.
yeah, well, I think about my own mortality at this point. I'm
Yeah.
enjoying every day of my life, but I know I'm not going to be here for another 30 or 40 years. I'll be here for however long I'm going to be here, and I'm going to live to the best that I can. But that's an interesting point, is that there's 8 billion people on this planet. In 100 years, all 8 billion of us will be gone. Isn't that
Yeah.
amazing?
Yeah.
And then there'll be another 8 billion, but all 8
Mhm.
billion of us will be gone, give or take, in 100 years. Maybe the infants being born will still be living at 101 years
Yeah.
old or something. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
death is just a part of life. And what I would say to anyone at my age, 80 years old, whatever it may be, is to understand that we've got to find gratitude for the years that we had that person in our life. That's why my book is called Grief to Gratitude, because it's a true journey. Of course, you're going to feel grief. We're humans when someone dies. But that's not the end. That's the beginning. That's when the door opens and we can continue to move through and eventually come to gratitude. Gratitude for the relationship we had for all those years. I was together with my wife for almost 40 years. How lucky am I? I had my
Mhm.
son for 23 years. I could have not had a son at all. I had a son for 23 years that I had so much fun with, and I have found a way to have an ongoing relationship with him even after his death. But be grateful for the time that you had, as opposed to resent or be mad about the time you don't have. Be
Yeah.
great.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And then maybe if we continue to move forward, be grateful to understand that life does go on and we can continue to have a relationship with someone. It's going to be very different. It's not going to be sitting at a Starbucks with them, but it can be in the form of many different ways. Some of it might
Mhm.
just be, people just feel,
Mhm.
presence of their spouse,
Yeah.
or and be grateful for that
Mhm.
time. Gratitude is the great healer. Gratitude, not that the person died, gratitude for the experience that we're having, that's helping us see life and death in a different way. That's why I say gratitude is ultimately where we need to all eventually get to, and that's the great healer.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. And where can listeners find your book and learn more about your work and connect with you?
Thank you. Easiest way is really just go to my website, which is my name, Steven Ferrara, Ferrara.com. So StevenFerrara.com, you'll be able to get on my Instagram, get on my Facebook. I have Substack articles. I have interviews on it. I try to keep it up to date. It's not the most up to date. If you're interested in the book, certainly you can go to Amazon from there, or Amazon directly. Look up Grief to Gratitude. And yeah, so StevenFerrara.com.
I for sure want your book. I'm gonna
Yeah.
order it for because I'd like to give it as gifts because I think it's a different take on what's been said many different other ways. Stephen, thank you so much for opening your heart to us today. You've shown us that while grief is the price we pay for love, healing is always possible. Your story reminds us that even after life's deepest heartbreak, hope can still find us.
Yeah, and perhaps the greatest gift you shared is that by changing the way we think about death, we can begin living more fully. And we can live with more compassion and gratitude and appreciation for every day we're given, that gift of life. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Cathy and Merry. This has really been enjoyable. I hope I've been of some help.
And thank you. And for our listeners, if today's conversation has touched your heart, please share this episode with someone who may be grieving or who simply wants to live with a little more peace and purpose.
And for our listeners and viewers, be sure to subscribe to Late Boomers, the Late Boomers podcast, wherever you listen. And we'd especially love for you to subscribe to our Late Boomers podcast YouTube channel, where you can watch every episode and join our wonderful community.
And until next time, remember what we late boomers always say.
It's never too late to rethink what is possible. Thank you, Steven.
Thank you.